January 7th, 1945, just after dawn, in the Ardennes forest. Snow is already packed hard underfoot, and the cold has settled in for the day. An American infantry officer steps out from the trees and stops the moment he sees what is waiting for him. German soldiers, more than 30 of them spread across the ground ahead. They are armed. They are alert. They already have the high ground. Behind him, there is nothing. No cover, no support, no one moving into position. He is alone, and the Germans realize it at the same time. Weapons come up. Orders are shouted. The distance closes in his mind. This is a closed equation. One man facing dozens of rifles at close range, with no room to maneuver and no time to withdraw. By any measure, surrender is the only rational outcome. Instead, the officer adjusts his coat, checks his footing in the snow, and begins to walk forward. Not quickly, not carefully, straight into their line of fire. What happens next takes less than a minute.
On paper, this officer is the wrong man for this situation. He's not physically imposing, and he does not dominate a space when he enters it. Nothing about him signals immediate threat. He's an infantry officer, which matters more than it sounds. Infantry officers are trained to work inside systems, with platoons, formations, and mutual support. They're trained to move with structure and to survive because that structure holds. They are not trained for this. Here, the system has already broken down. His authority comes from coordination, not presence, from procedure, not intimidation. And in this moment, procedure offers him nothing. He is alone, not briefly separated, not moments from support, alone in the literal sense. The terrain does not help him either. This stretch of forest opens without warning, pulling movement into the open and removing the cover he would normally rely on. Snow slows every step. It drags at the legs. It records movement without mercy. Anyone watching can track him without effort. The Germans already hold the advantage. They have the higher ground, which means they see first and decide when contact begins. He carries no weapon that changes the balance, no machine gun, no mortar, no indirect fire. There is no artillery assigned to this sector, no armor operating close enough to matter. He cannot call for help. There is no radio contact, no immediate reinforcement, no secondary element moving into position. If he runs, the distance is too short and the angles work against him. If he hides, he is fixed in place, then surrounded, then removed. If he chooses to fight, he faces multiple firing positions at once. This is not a dramatic dilemma. It is an administrative one. Military doctrine exists to remove ambiguity, to ensure decisions are predictable when conditions turn against you. When a single infantryman encounters a superior force, the expected outcomes are clear. Withdraw if possible, surrender if necessary. Those choices preserve manpower. Everything else increases loss. There is no section in any manual that explains how to proceed from here. No checklist, no conditional response. By every measurable standard, this officer should fail. And nothing about the situation suggests it would take long.
This is not the first time this officer has operated without certainty. Earlier in the campaign, he learned what it meant to move when information arrived late and clarity never arrived at all. Orders were incomplete. Maps lagged behind reality. Radio contact came and went. Small errors accumulated quickly. He learned to read space instead. Distance, exposure, what could be seen and what could not. Contact rarely announced itself. A sound in the trees, movement where there should have been none, a shape that did not belong. Decisions had to be made before confirmation arrived. Wait too long and initiative disappeared. Move too early and you exposed the men who trusted you. He learned to decide anyway. During one movement, his element advanced farther than planned. They realized it only after the firing stopped. No supporting unit appeared, no adjacent element closed the gap. Withdrawal would mean crossing open ground, under observation, with wounded slowing every step. He held them in place. Not by force, by instruction. Spacing was adjusted, positions shifted, fire was controlled. They waited longer than expected. When the enemy moved, the distance was already measured. The exchange was brief. It ended quickly. They withdrew intact. There were no citations, no formal recognition, but the pattern stayed with him. Isolation did not always mean defeat. It meant responsibility. Later, under different conditions, the same pressure returned. Orders arrived late. Terrain no longer matched the plan. Enemy positions had shifted. The plan no longer applied. Again, there was no guidance to follow. He adjusted the problem instead of attempting to solve it all. He focused on what mattered immediately. He ignored what did not. That habit mattered. It formed an internal checklist, unwritten, unspoken. What can be seen? What cannot? Who is exposed? Who is not? Where time is gained? Where it is lost? By the time he steps into open ground on this morning, those calculations are already familiar. Not comfortable, but familiar.
By the winter of 1944, the situation around him had changed. The war had slowed, but it had not become easier. Units were under strength. Replacements arrived with minimal preparation. Orders came later than they should have, and changed more often than they were followed. The margin for error narrowed. Fatigue settled in, not the kind that fades after sleep, but the kind that accumulates. Men learned to operate without certainty. Weather dictated movement. Supply dictated tempo. Enemy pressure dictated everything else. In this environment, initiative mattered more than rank. During one advance, his unit was assigned ground that no longer matched the map. Roads were blocked, paths were gone. The enemy had adjusted. Waiting for clarification would cost time, and time would expose them. He made the adjustment himself. Not a dramatic maneuver, a quiet one. He altered direction, tightened spacing, and reduced speed. The unit moved slower, but it moved intact. Later, under different conditions, the same pressure returned. A holding position became a liability. Communications failed. Supporting elements were delayed. The plan no longer applied. Again, there was no clear instruction to follow. He chose to act within the limits he understood. He focused on ground that mattered. He ignored ground that did not. He shortened the problem until it could be solved. That approach was not taught, it was learned. It came from operating where plans broke and time compressed. By this point in the war, those conditions were common. Enemy resistance was unpredictable. Friendly units were stretched thin. Every movement carried risk. Decisions were no longer about success, they were about avoiding collapse. On this morning, as he steps into open ground, that context is already in place. He is not reacting to surprise. He is operating inside pressure he has already experienced. The scale is different. The numbers are larger. But the structure is familiar. That is what carries him forward. Not confidence, not courage. Familiar pressure, applied one more time.
The situation resolves itself into numbers. Distance, time, angles. They favor the Germans. The ground ahead is open, and the ground behind offers nothing better. Movement will be seen. Any change in pace will be noticed. There is no route that breaks contact cleanly. If he advances quickly, he exposes himself before he can influence anything. If he slows, he gives the enemy time to settle, to place weapons, to remove uncertainty. If he turns back, the open ground works against him. He will be tracked, measured, engaged at a distance chosen by someone else. Cover does not exist in useful quantities. Concealment does not last. Every option closes another. The Germans control elevation, which means they control observation. They see movement before it matters. They decide when it matters. Firepower is not balanced. It is not close. Multiple rifles, at least one machine gun, fields of fire that overlap. Against one man, with no support. The mathematics do not change. There is no maneuver that shifts the equation, no feint that creates hesitation, no delay that improves the outcome. Even surrender carries risk. The distance is short. The weapons are already up. Trust is theoretical. From a doctrinal perspective, the conclusion is obvious. This is the point where action stops and compliance begins, where survival depends on recognition, not initiative. That is what the numbers say. They say he should raise his hands. They say he should wait. They say he should accept the result. There is no scenario here that ends well, only scenarios that end. And he understands that, fully, before he moves.
The moment arrives without warning. There is no signal, no countdown. 1 second, the situation is static. The next, it is irreversible. The officer moves. Not toward cover, not away. Forward. The distance closes faster than expected. German voices rise, orders overlapping, trying to resolve a change that should not be happening. Weapons track him. Not all at once, not cleanly. That hesitation matters. He does not hesitate. His weapon comes up in one motion, already aligned. The first shots are close, too close for adjustment. One target collapses, then another. The sound is sharp, contained, violent. The Germans react, but reaction lags action. Some fire too high, some fire too late. Positions that were secure seconds earlier are suddenly wrong. Movement replaces planning. The officer keeps moving. He does not stop to assess. He does not pause to confirm. He fires where bodies cluster, where angles compress, where confusion compounds. The distance shrinks again. A weapon jams. Another is dropped. Orders are shouted, then cut short. The structure collapses. What was a firing line becomes individuals. Individuals become obstacles. Seconds pass. Not many. When the sound finally fades, the ground has changed. The mathematics no longer apply. Those still standing hesitate. Hands rise. Weapons fall. The equation closes. Not cleanly, not neatly, but completely.
The noise drops away. Orders stop overlapping. Movement slows. The officer does not celebrate. He does not speak. He scans. Weapons. Bodies. Spacing. He checks what still functions. Those who can move are directed where to stand. Those who cannot are left alone. Control returns in fragments. The ground is secured, not because it is safe, but because it is no longer contested. The Germans who remain do not resist. They lower their weapons. They wait. The officer adjusts the perimeter. Positions are reassigned. Fields of fire reestablished. Distance measured again. Only now does the situation become manageable. Only now does it resemble something familiar. There is no sense of victory. What just happened is processed as a task completed. The cost is noted, not counted aloud. The officer reports when required, briefly, without emphasis. There is no attempt to explain how the situation turned. It does not matter. What matters is that it is over. Control has returned. And with it, the war resumes its normal pace.
Stories like this are often reduced to courage. That explanation is convenient. It is also incomplete. What determined the outcome here was not strength or speed or aggression. It was familiarity with pressure. The officer did not act because he believed he would win. He acted because the situation allowed no neutral choice. Waiting carried risk. Compliance carried risk. Action simply concentrated it. By the time the moment arrived, the decision had already been made, quietly, over weeks and months of smaller problems. This is how outcomes are shaped in war. Not by singular moments of clarity, but by habits formed under repetition. Reading space, accepting uncertainty, moving when structure collapses. Nothing about this event changed the war. It did not alter the front. It did not shift strategy. But it did resolve a problem, completely. And in war, that is often enough. The record notes what happened. It does not explain how it felt. That understanding is left to those who recognize the pattern and move anyway.